My name is Chrisa Hickey, and I am from Ephraim, Wisconsin. So I've been caring for Tim. Tim is 30 years old, my son, and he has schizophrenia. He was diagnosed in middle school, so I think this is year 19. Yes, we had to, not understanding what that meant and what it meant as far as the implications for Tim, growing, as almost a teen, and what that was going to mean for the rest of his life. I jumped into the research mode. How much could I find out about schizophrenia? What are the prognoses for people with schizophrenia when they're diagnosed at different ages? What are the different medications he might have to be, or any kind of treatment he'd have to have, either now or throughout his lifetime. So I kind of jumped into resource mode as a caregiver, trying to figure out the best way to support him and frankly to support the rest of our family as we were trying to navigate this. One thing I might do differently is help Tim's siblings understand better what was going on with him. It was very difficult for them to figure out and understand what was happening with Tim. I think my biggest challenge was trying to figure out how to juggle learning how to care for Tim and everything that went into initial diagnosis, trying to get him stable, trying to get him the right care, the right medication, what all those things meant, and also trying to have a full-time job, have a family at home, have other children with their own activities and issues and things going on. It was a monumental task. At one point, and when Tim was first diagnosed, we had to take a look at how our family was configured and really figure out if there was a way we could change it, because it took up so much of our time trying to help Tim get set up to hopefully eventually be successful and live well with this disease later, ongoing in his life. So we were lucky in that we were able to make some adjustments to our lives so that my husband actually became the stay-at-home parent. And we kind of divided and conquered what we were going to tackle so that it wasn't necessarily a huge burden on one or the other of us. I think it's that schizophrenia is not their personality. When Tim is stable and his meds are working great and he's feeling well, Tim has an amazingly effervescent personality. He's very personable. He rides his bike all over town. He's got friends and activities and things he gets involved in. But when he's having a particularly bad day or bad period, what you see can be confusing and even sometimes a little bit frightening. And that's not, and this is for anyone with schizophrenia, their symptoms are not their personality. So when his emotions are flat, or when he's illogical or a little paranoid, or that's not who he is. He's in there somewhere. He's a great person in there somewhere. They're very much two separate things. And I think as a caregiver, that's important to remember too, because it can be very frustrating sometimes to care for someone who can be, while they're in the throes of their symptoms, the most irrational person you've ever seen. And it can be very hard to think about separating the symptoms of the illness from the actual person. And I think that took me a while to learn how to do. But once I did, it made it much easier for me to see this as something that Tim and I were trying to manage together, rather than me trying to manage Tim. NAMI's been very important to us as far as helping us learn how to be a caregiver for someone with a serious mental illness. They've got classes for caregivers. They've got support groups. It's been very helpful to be able to, when I eventually found them, to be able to talk to people that understood what I was talking about. I mean, this can be a very isolating disease for the whole family, just because of the stigma and the misunderstanding around what schizophrenia really is. It's not like you can go to your next door neighbor and say, you wouldn't believe what happened today, as Tim was hallucinating. It's a little too scary to talk to with, most normal people. So having a resource like that, when I finally did find them, and my local, was very helpful. And it was harder early on, before we really got Tim to a place where he was stable and healthy. It was difficult for us to find time together to connect, so that when we were both overwhelmed, because it's not like I can call up a babysitter or even a grandparent necessarily and say, hey, can you watch this kid, this teenager or this young adult with schizophrenia for a while. But finding little ways for us to connect, even if it was after the kids are all finally in bed, or Tim was settled down for the night, or now since he has his own place, when Tim goes home, being able to sit down and connect together to do something that we like to do together that has nothing to do with caregiving, has been important to try and carve out that time. There's nothing you can do as the caregiver to make your loved one stay compliant with their care. You can encourage them, you can support them, you can be there for them when they are finally ready, but there's nothing you can do. If Tim didn't want to take meds, even as a teenager, there's not a whole heck of a lot I could do about it. I think the other thing I learned is that a lot of, especially if you're caring for a family member, or especially a child, I blamed myself. My husband and I, we blamed ourselves in some cases for how this could happen. Did we do something in raising him the wrong way? I've heard from a lot of other parents, is there a genetic component I wasn't aware of in my family, so it's my fault I passed this on to my kid? Blaming yourself, having a little pity party for that is fine for a little bit, but you can't dwell in that, because if you are feeling that kind of guilt, you're not going to be able to care for the person the way they need to be cared for. And you're also going to do a lot of detriment to yourself.